Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, first of all, to Beya Othmani, who has been working on this project for a few months now. And we're going to be discussing the topic about this specific example of Blackness and the politics of Blackness at the first World Festival of Black Arts. So let me just start by saying here at Hyperallergic, just recognizing that we are on the land of the Lenape, the Shinnecock, and Haudenosaunee people, based here in Brooklyn. I want to introduce a little bit of Beya and her biography. She's an independent art curator and researcher based in the Tunisian capital of Tunis. She's a member of the curatorial group Archive Sites, a platform for publishing and curatorial research. And she's currently a recipient of the CAORC Andrew Mellon Art History Fellowship. Her research focuses on exhibition history's construction of racial identities in the arts and state-led exhibition making practices in colonial and post-colonial Africa. Welcome, Beya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your own background in terms so we can understand a little bit how you got to this place where you're interested in these racial identities and the construction of racial identities and exhibition making in Africa.
Yes, sure. So I've been looking, through the Andrew Mellon Fellowship, Research Fellowship. I've been really focusing on exhibition history in the region, and more specifically exhibition histories after the independence. And living and working and researching in Tunisia, I've been mainly focusing on the Tunisian context, and from Tunisia try to draw a history of like an African art history in relationship to the Tunisian context. I've been very interested in the way that the states after independence approached exhibition making as a practice, but also exhibition as potential spaces to to create narratives, and so I was trying to map some exhibitions, international exhibitions, to which the Tunisian state participated. And this is when I stumbled, you can say, upon the figure of Fela Kefi Leroux, who is a Tunisian national who participated in the first World Festival for Black Arts. And then I was really, surprised to find out that Tunisia might have participated in that festival. And then my inquiry started from there.
And in terms of, I guess, to give a context for people who may not be aware, in the context of colonial and post-colonial Africa, would you say that the majority of exhibitions were state-led? Or, I mean, what role did these state-led exhibitions actually have in the country? Because I think sometimes in the United States, state-led exhibitions aren't necessarily as dominant in terms of the discourse in art. And I'm wondering, in the case of Africa, how they what role they play.
Sure. So I cannot give a general answer about the whole continent, but what I can say about Tunisia is that the state played a major role as a cultural actor and cultural producer after the independence. The state was the main actor, the main enabler, or actor of revolution and revolutionary action, and therefore the state tried to plan, to create an action plan and think through culture and national identity through culture at the wake of its independence. And I know it's been the case in other countries. Then again, they are not my specialty.
Right. Absolutely. So let's look at your first post, so we can talk a little bit about what we're looking at. Let's start here. Okay. So here we're looking at the discussion around this is the actual exhibition we're looking at. One second, I think 1 second. I may have pulled up the wrong one. So let's start with the other exhibition or the other post first. So let's talk a little bit about your sort of what you discovered in this research and how your own sort of process started, and what are some of the challenges you faced when you were sort of researching this? Because, you know, not all this information is you know, perhaps easily accessible.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was conducting the research in an academic setting in the research center of the CIMAT, Center for Maghrebi Studies in Tunis. And it is, you can say, it is documented like an academic paper, but it's not footnoted on hyperallergic. I just want to say this. So as I said, I've been looking into the Festival for Black Arts, the 1966 Festival for Black Arts, and I was wondering, you know, if the Tunisian state participated, which artists did the state send, and did the state perceive itself as a Black state, you know, to be able to participate in a Festival for Black Arts? And if not, or if yes, what was its position towards Black identity? And how did Black identity fit in the framework of the national identity it was trying to construct? So I started to look at first of all, the relationship of the Tunisian state towards Pan-African movements and towards diplomatic relations with other African states, and to approach, you know, that question. And this is when I found out that the second All African Peoples Conference, that was, you know, a major historic event that took place first in Ghana in 1958, was organized, was organized in 1960 in Tunis. And that during that conference, the Tunisian president Bourguiba, really much affirmed his belonging, or Tunisian people's belonging to an African identity, and he also agreed with the existence of an African identity. And I found that he also, you know, proclaimed, or he also made such statements during a state visit in Dakar in 1965, where he also agreed with the President Léopold Sédar Senghor about a unique African experience. So then I was like, you know, so what about Blackness? Okay, so it's clear that the Tunisian state identified with the African continent, but did it identify with the Black identity? And on that, I must say, I didn't find any tangible or any direct sources that would lead me, that would help me find an answer to it. So I thought I might find an answer in the festival. So from then, from there, I looked at the archives of the Festival for Black Arts. There are no archives in
Sorry, before you continue, I just want to point out what we're looking at here. This is actually from the papers of W.E.B. Du Bois, correct? And what is it we're actually looking at here, for instance?
So we're looking at the first at the leaflet, the conference leaflet for the first All African Peoples Conference, and it was published in Ghana, and we're looking at the cover, and the countries that are in black were the independent countries at the time, and the conference included all the independent countries and also anti-colonial leagues from other countries that had not gained independence.
Got it. So here's also, so I guess this also gives a sense of the consciousness of Africa as a continent being liberated and making no differentiation.
Absolutely.
Between the two.
Absolutely. And it also gives a sense of common fight for freedom that is, you know, represented in the middle of that map.
And then, so I just go ahead, continue the story of talking about sort of your journey. I just wanted people to know what they were looking at.
No, no, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so in that journey, I found out that actually Tunisia did not send any artists officially to participate in the Tunisian delegation in that festival, and that the Tunisian artists that were present in the festival were sent to represent France, and that I found very intriguing. And in the archives of the festival that are in Dakar, I found that a correspondence between a diplomatic correspondence between the Senegalese ambassador in Tunisia and the festival organizers. And the Senegalese ambassador and the organizers were talking about the invitation they had extended to the Tunisian state to participate, and they were talking also about the guidelines they had sent with this invitation. So I found out that the festival organizers had very, rigid guidelines or strict guidelines about who could participate and who could not. And one of the main condition was that you had to be Black, and what was Black, was not up for debate in the eligibility criteria, you might say, but it was in the document, exactly, but it was up for negotiation during the festival, of course, as I explained in my piece. And in these documents, these diplomatic correspondences, I found very clearly an exchange about, with the Moroccan ambassador, saying that Arab Berber did not qualify as Black, and that Léopold Sédar Senghor did not consider them Black, and that Arab Berbers could only participate in the festival if they were of Black descent as well, if they shared any tie to Black genealogy. Yes.
That's interesting, because particularly since, I guess, with Amazigh or Berber people, there is a wide range of sort of like presentation.
Of course.
So I guess did you take that to mean that somebody who had a darker hue, or like what was that interpretation, or what were some of the things you found?
So at first my first one of my preconception was that these guidelines were very rigid, that they did not allow for spaces of negotiation. But actually, when it turns out that, even though Morocco, Libya, Egypt had received these guidelines, they still sent artists that were arguably not Black, and nothing happened,
Right.
They were not refused from the festival. This is why I'm saying it was not literally black and white.
Right.
There were guidelines, but then the way they were put in practice was not as obvious as it seemed. And especially looking at the French participation and the North Africans that France brought in that festival, I really found that they were even contradicting we say expressions of Black identity or white identity playing out in the festival in the same exhibition space. And I'm talking about that in the piece.
Right. And do you, so I guess for people who haven't had a chance to read this piece yet, now in your own sense, did you have a sense that France's decision to send North Africans or people of North African descent, was it because of France's own notion of Blackness, or like what do you think that's about?
So that is really an unanswered question that I'm still looking for. I'm still trying to answer that question, because there was no record on the French side of debates on the Blackness of participants or the non-Blackness of participants. Because as I mentioned in another piece, there are traces on the American side, for instance, of debates on whether to include non-Black participants or not. I did not find such documents. Maybe they exist, but I still didn't find them. So I don't know how actually France chose its artists, and I don't know also what was France's role in the festival, because that I don't mention it in the piece, but France was the main sponsor for the festival. And most of the team, the organizing team, a lot of the curators, not most, sorry, but a big part of the organizers and the curators were Frenchmen and not Black. So I'm wondering whether this had an impact actually on the way that Blackness was framed in the festival, and what was their role, you know, and their interest in sponsoring such an event, and whether it undermined the political impact of the festival. These are really, you know, questions that I still have to study yet.
We have a comment, if you don't mind me bringing in. Yeah. I love that we have questions during this. So I'm just going to read this comment question. Yeah. Actually, it's more of a statement from Dr. Jackie Lewis Harris. Yes. Wrote, they wanted darker skinned people to show other Africans how liberal and inclusive they were. The French did the same in the Paris of Pacific Arts many times.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that.
So there seems to be a larger thing here. So that's really interesting. Thank you for adding that comment.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And here, according to this photo in the first article, you mentioned there's this notion of this booth of Tunisian culture that people would have visited as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So this photo is from the Lagos 1977 festival. So that took place 10 years later, and this was the second Black Art Festival. And I touch upon it briefly in my piece at the end of the piece, because it was an interesting festival, because as Nigeria was organizing it, a conflict arose again. You know, a disagreement arose again on the participation of Arab African states in the festival. And then Senegal threatened to pull out its participation. And finally, the festival's name was changed as a compromise to be able to include all African states. It went from a Black Arts Festival to Black and African Arts Festival. Mm. And Tunisia then participated in that festival. And they sent visual artists to participate, contemporary visual artists to participate. They sent performers, dance performers, music performers, and they also created a booth that you see there of Tunisian culture, where they had a display of photos and musical instruments and objects from Tunisia.
And do you mind just talking a little bit about how you got these photographs and who the individual who's taking these photographs is?
Yes, sure. And I really want to thank him publicly. His name is Rida Najjar, and he was a journalist at that time, and he was a cultural reporter for a Tunisian magazine called Dialogue, and he traveled to Lagos in '77 to cover the event from the Tunisian side, and he wrote extensively about it, and we translated some of his writing for the piece. We resurrected them. He was very happy that his photos and texts were recirculating and that they find an echo in today's context.
Right. And how would you characterize his experience at the festival?
Well, I like reading his experience, because it was really a journalist experience. He didn't want to give an opinion. He did not have an opinionated experience, but he was really reporting on the different opinions and disagreements that were unraveling in the festival. And for instance, he describes, a whole heated debate during the Lagos Festac Festival about negritude, and I like that he brought in the quote of Wole Soyinka, who was arguing apparently in a debate with delegates of Senegal who were defending the negritude principles. And Wole Soyinka, the Nigerian writer, told them, "Does the tiger sing about its tigritude?" You know, I thought these moments were historical and important to you know
Right.
to be shared again.
Right. And did he talk to you at all about his own experience, just sort of being as a Tunisian part of this festival and what he thought was being accomplished or anything like that?
Well, I mean, he documented most of it. He documented most of it. He understood, of course, the importance of such festivals. You know, they were very key in creating spaces to, like, political spaces to create alliances. You know, national, translocal alliances in times where you know. Nation was still being constructed and was still, you know, in a vulnerable state. So it was like a very important experience for him as well, a political experience as well.
Right. And what is this we're seeing here? This is one of the performances that happened in
Yes.
1977?
Yes, so this is a performer, his name, a Tunisian performer who performed a dance ritual, a dance part of a religious ritual. His name is Abdelmajid Ben Abdeslam Jartila. And at the end of his show, apparently he stacked 5 pottery jars on top of his head, and it drove the public really ecstatic, and everybody started applauding him.
And am I right to assume that this is a dark-skinned Tunisian man?
Yes, 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 and we do have there are black Tunisians. This is very important to note.
So, right, and I just wonder. So, in terms of that, did that discourse between blackness and non-blackness in Tunisia come up at all in any of this conversation?
Absolutely, not with Fela Kefi, Leroux, or Rita Najar, but it's coming up at the moment because
at the moment.
At the moment, politically, it's been very tense the past week in Tunisia politically because of political statements, a racist political statement made by our president that targeted sub-Saharan migrant population in Tunisia, and that created or triggered a wave of anti-black violent, attacks in Tunisia, targeting all black people, Tunisians and non-Tunisians. So it was very important, to put, to recirculate this history, because it's important to be able to use the field of art history maybe to investigate one's own historical relationship to race and racism. And I think to understand also that it was never black and white, and literally that, race is a construct imposed by another gaze, and that as Africans, we all fell under this gaze at some point in history. And even though we did not, each other identify as black or white, someone else did identify us as such. And the festival, the Black Art Festival, is a proof, among many others, that there is, a shared racialized experience of oppression.
Right.
And I think that's important. Yeah.
Right. But during these 2 festivals, the specific ones we're talking about, was that discussion within Tunisia did that ever take place? Have you found anything in the archives between Black Tunisian and non-Black Tunisian?
I really wish.
Nothing yet.
I didn't find really. I found a lot of reports on Tunisian medias about the festivals, but reporting from an external point of view, feeling completely disidentified from the Black Art Festival, which I found also interesting. They did not take any position or did not identify with the festival. I know that there's been, again, this is not really my area of research, but I've read articles coming from the Algerian and Moroccan side, from artists and intellectuals who have been, debating or criticizing the concept of the negritude, blackness as advanced by Léon Gontran Damas, Aimé Césaire, and Léopold Senghor. And I know also that other African intellectuals, as I mentioned in the piece, from other African countries also criticized that concept and accused it sometimes of reproducing colonial identities, not allowing the African continent to actually unite. Creating separation rather than unity.
Right, and here we see a stamp issued by the Tunisian post office.
Yes.
This was a work by a Tunisian artist?
Yes, so I found this stamp very interesting because it was the first stamp issued by the Tunisian post office to commemorate the first All Africans People's Congress that took place in Ghana. So this stamp was issued on April 15th, 1960, which was the second anniversary of the conference. And I was very interested to see how the Tunisian artist Hatem El-Mekki perceived Tunisia and perceived the African continent and African identity. And again, I found it very dualistic. It was like Africa is an embrace between black and white, but what is in the middle? I feel like there is no, in his perception at least, or the perception of this stamp, there was no place for a middle ground.
Yeah, interesting. And then what are we seeing here at the end? There's historian.
So he's an intellectual during the colloquium from right. who was taking part in the debate, that heated debate that Rida Najjar was reporting on. Yes.
Right. And so what was the biggest surprise for you in this research specifically around this and the archives that are available and what's not available? Anything about that what wasn't available that you still would love to find?
Yes. So as I said before, there are still a lot of questions that are unanswered. The first one was really concerning Tunisia. What was its position towards Black identity, Tunisian state again, and how did Black identity fit in the framework of national identity? And is there a way to again investigate those questions through the field of art history and exhibition history? I'm also, as I said, there's still a lot to be researched on France's role in the festival and France's curatorial contribution to the festival. And I must say that one big preconception I had of the festival, or the Dakar 66 festival, or the Lagos 77 festival, or even the Algiers 1969 festival, is that these were moments of uncontested unity. And we tend to, a lot of us tend to look at them with a lot of nostalgia as a golden age of Pan-African brotherhood. But I was really surprised to find out that within those, apparent moments of utopic moments of unity, actually there were disagreements, there were conflicts unraveling in the background. Yeah.
So now we're looking at the exhibition.
Yes.
And why don't you start by just sort of explaining to us what your concept was for this exhibition and what you're focusing on and why you thought this was important right now.
Sure. So in order to answer a lot of the questions I evoked in our talk now, I thought it would be interesting actually to collect the testimony of a participant of the festival, a North African participant of the festival, and Felake Fileroux who is a Tunisian French artist. Now she has been naturalized in the 1970s. Had participated in the festival, sent by France to represent France's contemporary Black art scene, and so my idea for the exhibition was to create a conversation with her, but also have an archival display to kind of try to give a sense, reconstruct her experience of the event, and gauge, you know, if I may say, her perception of her own Blackness. And so that was the initial concept.
And so these items are a collection of various things from the festivals,
Right.
including some historical photography here.
Right.
Now,
Right.
you also mentioned one of the things in the post you mentioned was Alvin Ailey Dance Theater also
Yes.
included an Asian American dancer. So again, you were trying to understand how people saw this Black Arts Festival and who was eligible to participate.
Yes, yes, yes. I read this in the paper of an American scholar, and I can share it with you if you are interested. This is not
Please.
my. I mean,
Yep.
this scholar looked at the how do you say, the American organization, the organization of the festival on the American side, and she reports on the whole debate that took place around the participation of of non-Black artists from the American side, and especially it posed the problem when the Alvin Ailey Alvin Ailey dance theater troupe wanted to include an Asian American dancer. In the end, it was resolved, and the organizers agreed to. And we were lucky to find actually a photo of that performance in the archives of the Museum Quai Branly Jacques Chirac in Paris.
Right. So when you say was do you mean that there was an actual discussion of whether he should be included?
Absolutely.
And where among the organizers of the festival, the French organizers, or just generally, or how did that work?
No, the American delegation. So each country was responsible in organizing its own, you know, delegation. So Senegal only invited countries, so they were in communication with the diplomatic services. They were not in conversation directly with artists, and then countries had to select their own artists and send them to Senegal.
Right. So what was there the conversation that you discovered? Like, what were the pros and cons, or what was the actual conversation around, and why did you choose to allow it?
I can try to download that conversation again, and if you
No,
want.
I mean it's all right. I just
Yeah.
generally, I guess what was surprising was it that they were afraid that because he wasn't Black that the troupe wouldn't be, you know, representative, or were they sort of saying, well, because this person is not white, this would be okay? Do you have a sense of that?
I guess they were all trying to follow the guidelines, and the guidelines were so strict, you know,
Right.
so everybody was afraid of trespassing, you know, or not. No, yeah, like, sorry,
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the right
No,
word.
I get it. Yeah. To stick to
break the rules. So they were very careful, and yeah.
And so what did the artist, what did Leroux tell you about the work and the display, or the actual participating in this festival? What did it do, and what did it perhaps, you know, enlighten them about?
Yes. It's funny because the first thing she told me was, the festival was 60 years ago, so don't expect me to remember anything. But she still remembered a lot of things, and was very grateful to that festival, because she always said it was a turning point in my life, in my professional career, and I owe everything to the festival. This morning she called me and said the same thing, you know, because during that festival, it's during that festival that she made her debut as an artist. She was in the beginning of her 20s, freshly graduated from the School of Fine Arts in Tunis, and participated to a major international exhibition. And during that exhibition, she was invited by the Tunisian Ministry of Culture, who was visiting Dakar for the festival. She was invited to attend an official dinner at the Tunisian embassy, and from then on got an invitation to be a resident of the prestigious Cité des Arts in Paris, where she spent 2 years, and from then on became an interior designer in an international firm, and really had a very rich professional career.
And here she is right here.
Exactly, she's on the right
nice.
with Maurice Sonam Senghor, who is the nephew of ex-Senegal President Leopold Senghor, and one of the curators of the festival. We could not identify him by name, but she remembers he was one of the curators of the festival. She did not remember, though, other Tunisian artists who participated in the exhibition. For instance, we know of another Tunisian painter who was there, but she does not recall, and she does not recall meeting any other, North Africans. But she made a lot of friends and contacts that really opened a lot of doors for her.
And did she talk to you about how it made her feel African or more African, or whether the question about Blackness came up at all at the festival?
Yes. So it did come up, but not as much as I thought it would. So one of the preconceptions I had was that the festival must have had really an impact on her, politically, or must have really left an imprint on her, and that because the colloquiums were so political, they had a strong anti-colonial and anti-racist line. But as I talked with her, I realized that her experience in the festival was more more relaxed. I don't know if you can say that. More
social, maybe
more social. Exactly, more
right.
Social. She participated. She attended a lot of performance art, music events, screenings. She told me she did not attend any of the colloquiums and the conferences, for instance. And when she arrived there, before going there, she did not even know what was the Negritude movement. She told me,
Wow.
that I found very interesting. She was just, invited, and she was young, and she was like, an experience, amazing traveling. She had never traveled on outside of Tunisia on the African continent. So she just went without knowing really where she was stepping. And when she arrived there, she realized, well, it's a festival for Black arts, and I am apparently a Black artist. And that's what she was telling me. Everybody was telling her, "You're one of us. You're an African sister." And she was like, "Well, then, if I am one of you, so be it. I am one of you." And she accepted it. But that is to say, it was not really an experience that she thought through.
Right. But it also is interesting because the festival seemed to be so large that she could participate without going to these sort of these colloquiums and different things that often we talk about at this festival. So it also gives you an idea of people's very different experience of this festival.
Absolutely. I mean, there were things happening everywhere on sites of the festival and also on the street. You can imagine, the city of Dakar being filled with artists from more than 30 countries. And she was, going out for dinners, going out to dance. She had really wonderful social experiences there.
That's great. And here she is.
Yes, here she is having fun at the festival with
Did she go back to the second festival?
No, she didn't. No, she didn't. She was not. The second festival, they were only the Tunisian delegation, at least, sent Tunisian male visual artists to participate. There were no.
Right, I see. No women.
No.
And did she say that there was any kind of sense? I mean, you mentioned that she didn't maybe meet other North Africans, but was there a sense of a North African community there? Or, I mean, how much was the representation of, like, were people coming from Tunisia or Algeria or somewhere else to visit the festival itself? Was it popular that way? Was it in newspapers that way? Or?
So I know, for instance, that the Algerian side did not go at all to the festival, did not attend. Algeria and Senegal at that time had a diplomatic diplomatic disagreement, but I don't know a lot about it, for instance. But we know, for example, that Morocco sent a very numerous, you can say, numerous dance troupe. And they were doing performing Fantasia, which is a show on horses, and they were racing horses. And apparently, the group was really big, you know, in number. So that was impressive. From the reports that I read. A few Tunisian journalists attended the festival, but not a lot. And the prime minister, the cultural minister, Shedli Qlibi, attended the festival.
Got it. And these photographs, many of them were by the artist herself.
Yes. And I selected the photograph on the right of the man sitting on the ground sculpting, because I found it very interesting when she showed me the photos. She was like, "Oh, this is an artist in Dakar that I met, and I took a photo of him." And I found it really beautiful because she did not even question what artistry was, you know. For her, it was clear that this man who was making sculptures on the street was an artist. And I felt like the festival broadened and as well, as, you know, the traditional status, African status that we see that she photographed from the Black Art exhibition. So I found that the festival maybe had succeeded in proposing, you know, another or larger definition of what an artist is outside of the, you know, accepted Western canon of, you know, being trained in an art academy and practicing, you know, the art of painting or sculpture, classical sculpture.
Right. And are there any collections in Tunisia itself of sub-Saharan African art or any art like this? Or would this have been totally new for her when she went to the festival? Or she would have probably seen this in Paris, I'm guessing, or art like this.
She said it was completely new for her because I'm sure, she did not say that she saw things in Paris. She had been at that time in Paris only for a couple of years. So she was not, I don't think she attended any major exhibition of African art at that time, and at least she did not mention it. And there was, to my knowledge at least, no such collection in Tunisia. There were collections of Tunisian, so-called, again, Tunisian arts, Tunisian traditional arts in museums, but not coming from the whole African continent.
Right. And so this is a little bit more information about some of the exhibitions that were taking place there, right?
Exactly. So we have a map of the exhibition. We had at the top, we had a sneak peek inside the leaflet of the exhibition that was also translated to English. So I thought it was interesting, you know, for readers maybe on hyperallergic to read, you know, some of the statements that were written there. And there was also an artwork of the artist that I put in that exhibition. And it was, for me, important also to realize that the artist had submitted 3 works that were all ceramic-based works. And it really coincided with an artistic movement or an artistic wave in Tunisia to reappropriate or use, reintegrate local artistic technique in fine art practices as a form also of you know, say identity, post-colonial identity construction, or at least post-colonial art practice, you know.
Right, that makes sense.
And she was one of the students of the Tunis school artistic movement, and she was a student of Abdelaziz Gorgi, who was a famous, renowned Tunisian artist who taught her, who was her teacher in the ceramic studio. So I really liked how these artworks really inscribed themselves also in a history, in an, you know, an African post-colonial art history.
Yeah, I just want to sort of answer this. There was a comment, and please, if people have any questions, now is a great time to add them so we can address them. This question is just says, difficult event because Black Africans are often denied pride in their identity and culture due to their Blackness, but with how diverse people's backgrounds are, white passing Africans, it might also affect their own self-identity, trying to connect and support this aspect of their identity, not only to be denied. The discourse between North Africans who identify as African, Arab, and Black becomes an identity issue as well as a political issue. That's an understatement. Absolutely. That's you brought up this example that just this week of the Tunisian president making a comment about migrants. And you know, and yeah.
And I guess why I wrote that piece was that for a lot of us, I mean, I don't know if there is an us, but for a lot of people, it's kind of clear that they can, you know, whether they identify as Black or not. And some of them or some of us identify as white or non-white or white passing, and others as Black, others as brown. You know, there are many ways of identifying oneself. And for me, the festival showed us that even though you might identify yourself as a non-Black, someone else, you know, could identify you as a Black person, and that was really also interesting to see this unraveling in the festival.
Yeah.
And in the exhibition space.
And so did you find any kind of commonalities in the type of work that was being shown at the festival that you thought maybe was a little unexpected, particularly the North African work or the work specifically from Tunisia? Was there anything that wasn't, or were they showing the most popular work of the time, or was there a conscious sort of construction of a specific idea of Tunisia?
So you're talking about Lagos 1977.
I'm actually talking about both because
in Dakar, Tunisia did not participate. So
but the artists, you said there were two Tunisian artists.
Right, there were two Tunisian artists, but they were sent there to selected by French curators. So one was a painter, and the other one was also a painter, Felaké Filerou, but submitted ceramic-based works for that show. However, what I found surprising was that there was one French Algerian painter whose name was Jean-Michel Atlan, and he was at the time of the festival he was already dead. He passed away before Algeria's independence, so technically, you know, he's French, and he was born into a renowned Jewish family from the city of Constantine in Algeria, so a family that had a long lineage in being in Algeria. And he studied in France and joined the Cubist movement and was in the movement with Fernand Léger and Picasso. And he showed, and one of his work was exhibited there with Picasso's works and Fernand Léger. And these works were shown as European modernist works inspired by African culture. And I was really surprised to find that in the same festival you had Edgar Naqash, who was a Tunisian, also Jewish, French painter, who was presented in the Black art exhibition, and another Algerian, French, Jewish painter who was presented in the European modernist exhibition. So that was really also interesting, you know, that goes to show that, you know, there is no Black and white, at least it is actually it can be contested, and it can be imposed by, again, another's gaze.
So what did you see that was different between the two artists that you think made one exhibited in the Black art and the other one? I mean, was there anything you saw that?
One thing that was different was that at the time of the festival, first of all, one artist was alive, the other was not. So it left also a lot of leverage to French curators to position the deceased artist as they wished. You know, the artist did not have really a say in that. And the second difference was that Edgar Nakash was a graduate of the Tunis School of Fine Art, which was established under the French protectorate. But so technically it was a French school, but it was in a Tunisian colony. And Jean-Michel Atlan was a graduate of Paris School of Fine Art, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to, I don't know that for sure, but he was he graduated on the French metropolitan
system.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so that's good. There are a couple of other comments. Oh, this one's kind of useful for you. Says, this is not a question, but I saw today that Northwestern University's Library of African Studies has announced a grant for researchers to do research there in case it would support your work. So someone wants to help you out with suggesting a grant
Thank you so
Northwestern University. So that's good to know. The other one here, comments, I really appreciate your research. Thank you for sharing. I feel like there are connections that can be made in relation to the construction of race blackness with the European habit to call West Africans Moors in the early period of slavery encounter. This confusion correlation persists into the 19th century with European depictions of Orientalized, free of enslaved Black people in Europe and America. Is this addressed in any of the discussions you've researched from the 60s or 70s about what constitutes Black heritage? Is that a comment, or is that anything that comes up?
Actually, my research initially was really about the Tunisian state and its approach to exhibition making. And you can say that it is a coincidence, and a beautiful coincidence, that I opened the subject of Blackness and Black heritage. But there are scholars in Tunisia, and I mentioned some of them, like Afif Al-Tifi, who are doing work and specifically investigating those questions. It's not my area of expertise, even though I would have liked to. Yeah,
no problem.
And I would be interested actually to read papers if you.
Yeah, but was that conversation at all part of that? Did you see anything like, I guess the person's asking if any of that conversation around Moors or these kinds of notions of European, identity, I don't know.
Yes, I mean, of course, they were brought up in debates. I don't know specifically if the question of Moors was brought up, but the question of representation was brought up. The question of how Black people are represented, and one of the main goal of the first festival for Black arts was to reclaim a certain agency over the way Black people represent themselves. So the dream of Léopold Sédar Senghor was, we're going to do a festival where we show the world what it is to be Black, what is Black culture, what is Black arts, and who are Black people,
Right.
We have to take that into our own hands.
Right. I don't think we quite finished answering the question I had answered, so I'm just going to go back to it. In terms of, so in the 1977 festival, was there the delegation the Tunisian government had organized? Was there anything about it that was very, very unique? Or was it the biggest trends of the period, like the biggest Tunisian artists, or was there something that was unique about that artistic delegation?
Unfortunately, from the Tunisian side or the Nigerian side, there's not really archives of that participation. The only archives I found were reports of journalists. And I could recollect, I could make a small recollection of the Tunisian delegation, and the painters. I mean, they sent were really the most representatives of the most, like you say, the most famous established painters at that time, and they sent what they called the folkloric dance troupe that they had established at that time in history. It was a project also from initiated by the Ministry of Culture after the independence to archive and preserve dance cultures and musical heritage.
Right. And so in the case of the performer we saw with the jars on his head, would that have been a part of the folkloric sort of element,
Yes.
or so that
Yes.
would have been
That was part of the folkloric dance troupe show, and apparently, according again to the report of Rida Najjar, that part of the the performance was specifically a gugu dance performance. That is a gugu is a ritual, a religious ritual, and certain dance and music is performed as part of this religious ritual. It is performed by worshippers who are generally descendants of sub-Saharan Africans who have been in Tunisia for centuries and have are practicing these rituals.
Right. So here's another question from Dr. Lewis Harris. Thank you, Dr. Lewis Harris, for chiming in. Do you think the curators are the ones who define Black and Black art? I mean, like the functional, because you talked about the actual, the sort of the definition in the official literature. But like, do you think the curators? I guess that's the question. And then just added, were they directed by their governments, by your instinct, or I guess people want to sort of understand this.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because in the exhibition of contemporary arts, back then it was contemporary arts, called Tendencies and Confrontation, the curator, whose name was Iba Ndiaye, he was a Senegalese curator, and he did not actually choose the artworks that were going to be on display. He was rather, organizing the scenography and organizing the exhibition at large, but the country delegations were in charge of choosing the artists. And it's very unclear, again, I still have to do some research on that, who was curating, for instance, the French exhibition, the French part, or the American part, or, and those information resides in each country's archives. But the curator did not have a say. That was an interesting thing.
And you also mentioned in your piece that a number of the other, the sub-Saharan countries also sent, or a few sent non-Black participants, I should say, as well.
Yes, so that was in 1977 Lagos. And I thought it was interesting that that the journalist, the Tunisian journalist, being in Lagos, noted that there were non-Black. He said white. There were white participants as part of the Angolan dance troupe. Angola was historically a colony of Portugal, and so these were Portuguese, I guess, descendants, but I don't know for sure. And why I wanted to include this statement, it's because I found very interesting that at that moment in history, in 1977, a Tunisian journalist, without realizing, managed to identify someone as white as opposed to Black. So even though I thought that even though the festival maybe did not succeed in delineating clearly who was Black and who was not, it constructed at least an idea, or shared the agreed upon idea of who was white and who was not.
So we have another question here by Joanna Farron. Do you see any correlations between contemporary Tunisian arts institutional culture with the research you uncovered, such as the curatorial focus on specific types of work by specific race, ethnicity? Or do you find that with time, the focus regarding these topics has lessened or become more diverse? This question could go many ways, I think. I'm not.
Yes.
But I guess it's the idea of like Tunisia itself, like when there's a museum display, is there a racialization? Like, is there, like, let's say in a Tunisian museum, does like Black art appear? Or how does it, I guess, how do the institutions respond to this type of identity?
I really don't want to disappoint the audience here, but our first museum opened last year, and it's our first contemporary and modern art museum. And so far, it only hosts a collection of Tunisian modern arts. We don't have an international collection in that museum on display. However, what is very interesting is that in that collection, the first exhibition seeks to give an overview of Tunisian art, Tunisian painting as a practice, historically, and starts from the beginning of the 20th century, or actually the end of the 19th century, up until today. And the collection of the state, I found it very interesting. It includes a lot of French, Italian painters, Maltese painters in that collection, because at that time they were born and raised in Tunisia.
I see.
And they had not yet immigrated outside of Tunisia. So I was really fascinated by how the Ministry of Culture framed them as, Tunisians, or participating at least in the history of Tunisian painting.
Got it. So if anyone has any other questions, we're going to ask a few more and then we'll wrap up shortly. But I mean, I love this conversation because I think this is such an interesting historical sort of time capsule, right?
Yes.
Around notions of identity. Now, Tunisia now, like in terms of, I guess, the connections, the feeling, obviously ignoring the one comment by the president, unfortunately, but has there been an attempt to sort of maintain those ties artistically between Tunisia and other countries on the continent?
Yes, there has been actually attempts. We have a festival every year. It's called Cinema Festival, the Carthage Film Festival, and it's a state-sponsored film festival where the program is mainly an African Arab program. We have a lot of African filmmakers that come and showcase their film there. So there's a strong connection with the African continent through that festival. I know that there are other film festivals happening on the continent. There are also other exhibitions happening on the continent, such as, the Dakar Biennial or the Bamako Photo Biennial, to which Tunisians are participating and, still fostering or maintaining this relationship with the rest of the continent.
Yeah. And what do you think are some of the real shortcomings in terms of the resources for your research? Like doing this research, is there a shortage of accessible archives? Have things not been digitized? I mean, what are the real obstacles for this research?
I mean, the biggest obstacle is that the Tunisian state did not archive anything about those festivals. So there is nothing from the Tunisian side. And if there are things, I found them, for instance, for the Dakar Festival in the Senegalese side, and they are very scarce. So I don't know actually of any meeting reports or meeting minutes from the Tunisian delegation organizing their participation in the Lagos 77 Festival, for instance. So that's the main shortcoming.
Is that typical for that whole era, or is this like a little hole you found that's specific to these festivals? Like, are there other archives and these festivals don't exist, or is it that whole era there's a lack of archives?
I mean, I don't. Again, that's a big statement to say that whole era there is a hole in the archive. But actually, there is a hole in archive in that era, especially with regards to international events to which the state participated. Obviously, there's more archive on the events that Tunisia was organizing locally.
Oh, great. And so now, in terms of what are you going to be doing something next with this research? What would you like to do? And what has it taught you about your general topic about state-sponsored exhibitions by Tunisia? Like, what's so unique about this series of exhibitions that may inform the bigger research you're doing?
What's so unique about these exhibitions, and actually it encouraged me to look more into exhibitions that were organized by other international exhibitions that were organized by states that sought to that had a political project, that had a political agenda. For instance, the Two Black Art Festival really sought to restore a sense of unity between African and the Black diaspora and African countries at large. And there are examples of other exhibitions, such as, for instance, there was UN exhibition organized in Yugoslavia in '65 and another one in '75, an exhibition for peace and humanity. And the political agenda there was to create an exhibition in which countries from all blocs, from third world, from the Eastern Bloc and from the Western Bloc would come and find peace and you know, solve their conflicts through an exhibition. And there are many examples of those, you know, utopian exhibitions that had, like, again, political project of unifying or bringing countries together, creating solidarities. So this is where I'm now heading towards. I'm trying to map more of those exhibitions and hopefully publish more pieces, and why not, you know, make an exhibition one day.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Beya. This has been great. Thank you for sharing your research with us and for helping us think about this topic in a more inclusive and diverse way. Let's see. Someone's mentioning that the visual arts, the Afrocobra artist and chair of Howard University Art Department, the late Jeff Donaldson and Ed Spiggs, coordinated the delegation of US visual artists. So just
thank you so much.
To mention that for those who may be interested to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah, it was very
wonderful. So thank you, Beya. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll be having our next conversation next week. Stay tuned. And thanks everyone for your intellectual curiosity in this topic. Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye. You too. Bye.